Thank you very, very much, all of these speakers. This is not the first time I've ended up being the last presentation. And this always happens. I make my notes, and I come and I sit and I listen to all the other speakers, and I'm like, I'll cross that off. Psalm 19, the prophetic turn. Mary Oliver, a quote from Walking on Water by Madeleine LEngle. I haven't seen this yet. On March 9th, 2018, I saw this headline and it made me choke. Scott Kelly, maybe you know the Kelly twins. Scott and Mark Kelly, both astronauts. How about that family? NASA twins study confirms astronauts' DNA actually changed in space. Now that might be disturbing for you, but I'm a film critic. I watch a lot of movies. I know what happens when somebody comes back and their DNA has changed. A week later, I go and sit down for a movie called Annihilation. Yeah, Oscar Isaac is basically Scott Kelly. There's this meteorite or something that's hit the Earth, and it's created this zone. And anybody who goes into that zone comes out of that zone they're coming apart at the seams, basically. The environment around them has started to become a part of them, and part of them has started to become part of the environment. And Oscar Isaac goes home to his wife, Natalie Portman, and maybe he recognizes her. The house seems strangely familiar. His accent has changed. Things have changed. He is not the same person. And the report, and this couldn't be fake news, it was Newsweek. It was CNN. It was all over the place. 7%, the NASA report said, 7% of his DNA had been replaced, rewritten, by spending a year on the International Space Station. That's unnerving. That makes him perhaps the first extraterrestrial, because he left Earth as a human being, but what is he now? When he wakes up in the morning and his wife looks at him, is he the same man? Or is he an alien? And this reminded me of the church I grew up in and their concern about the world outside. Don't go to the movies, Jeff. Don't listen to rock music, Jeff. Beware the world. Beware dancing. Beware sex, it might lead to dancing. You know the joke. Beware nature. That one still bothers me. It wasn't that long ago that I told my pastor as I was walking in at the door of the church that I'd been gone the previous Sunday because I was deeply troubled by something, and I felt I just needed to go down to the edge of the water and pray. And his remark to me, I will never forget, well, you can't get there what you can get here. Remember, that is part of the fallen world. Let me tell you about my friend Gideon. He wants to talk to you about the Psalms, Pastor. So Oscar Isaac and these men go into the zone and they come back changed. And then Natalie Portman rounds up this group of women. They go in to find out what happened to these men. Or maybe they're going in to find answers about something else. And they start coming apart at the seams. Their borders become permeable. What is it about these Kelly brothers that they keep wanting to step into territories that are foreign to them? Now Mark Kelly is running for Senate, right, in Arizona. And his wife knows something about change. I mean, when you step into politics, you're stepping into a very toxic zone, and you probably will not come out of it the same person. And anyway, who is that guy staring at Mark from the crowd? Is that his brother? We can't really know. That, by the way, is the expression that's on the face of the 42 students who started my faith and film class last week when I got up to talk about the class. They thought, this being Seattle Pacific University, we were probably going to watch Christian movies or movies about Christianity. And I told them we were going to watch movies from all over the world, from people like, Woody Allen, and from storytellers from Rwanda, and storytellers from Japan, and people in very different worldviews, very different countries, very different visions. And they were, where are we going? Some of them expressed concerns in their first journal entry. I'm very wary about this. I grew up in a community where we watched Christian movies, but I've been taught to avoid exposure to, and they listed a very predictable list of things. And I said, well, bear with us. The goal is to learn some discernment. The goal is to learn how to, as SPU likes to say, engage the culture. I started with a film by a woman, from a story by a woman named Karen Blixen, also known as Isak Dinesen. She is known for writing out of Africa, so she knows a little something about stepping across borders and being changed. As she wrote about a person who had come from a rushed and noisy world to a still country, and how her senses woke up. And you can tell in the writing of Out of Africa that her senses woke up. But she also wrote another story that has been turned into a movie, and I'll bet almost all of you have seen it, Babbitts Feast. This, too, is about crossing borders. It's about a cloistered, very puritanical community on the Jutland coast in Denmark who have their Christianity code by which they live, and they acknowledge who in their community is the faithful and who is not. And as long as they check those boxes, they know they're safe. And they follow a very controlling minister, leader, who keeps them all in check. But then, out of charity, they receive a refugee from a civil war in France. And they don't know that she is bringing into their community a new language, a new way of being. They also don't know that she's one of the greatest chefs in the world. So she goes out into the wilderness to find the ingredients that she needs for food, to cook for them, to serve them, as a show of gratitude for how they have received her. Years and years go by, and she is still serving them the same humble food, the same boiled fish that they live on, and somehow she's finding it within herself to stick to that. But finally, when she wins the lottery, spoilers, she gets a chance to do what she's always wanted to do, be who she was born to be the great artist, and expose them to another world that they've never imagined. And so she serves them a real French feast. And they are introduced to new ideas, new sensations, to a hope bigger than their own righteousness. And it's funny how when they experience this food and their world gets bigger, suddenly their arguments seem so petty, and they start confessing. They start reconciling. It's this incredible story of redemption, but that actually is not what I'm interested in talking to you about. I'm interested in what precedes the feast. This has become one of the most interesting and fascinating moments to me. Before she decides to do this for them, she's been blessed suddenly with all of these resources, and she knows she has a chance to really be creative. What does she do? She walks down to the water. She skips church and she goes to the beach. And she looks out at that vast, blank canvas, feels the wind, listens to the waves, and the movie, thank God, takes a pregnant pause. And I see this again and again and again in great storytelling. In the movie The Insider, Russell Crowe plays the whistleblower who is going to expose the lies of big tobacco executives. And he knows if he does that in the courtroom, he is endangering himself and his wife and his children. There have been death threats. He gets to the courthouse and suddenly he turns, and Mike Wallace, played by Al Pacino, is like, "Where are you going?" And, or it's Al Pacino, "Where are you going?" And Russell Crowe goes down to the edge of the water and stares for a long, long time. The same pregnant pause, opening himself to what? He has argued with himself, he has reasoned over and over again, but he needs something more. There is this instinct to listen to something beyond his own vocabulary. You can see this again and again, not just in art movies, but even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Miles Morales, wondering if he really is meant to be the new Spider-Man, has to climb to the top of the tallest building, of course, and look out at this expanse of the city and listen, and the movie pauses. And he decides no, and he leaves. And then later he goes back. Okay, this time? Yes. And then he takes the plunge into the city and becomes the new Spider-Man and hits the ground running. His theme song, "What's up, Danger?" What's up, Danger? That's what I want my students to say in this class of 15 strange and alarming movies. What's up, Danger? I show them 2 films that I hope will become a vocabulary for them about faith, art, and the church. One of them is The Secret of Kells, an extraordinary animated movie about the creation of the Book of Kells, in which young Brendan, an acolyte within the monastery of Kells, has a chance to contribute his creativity to the making of the Book of Kells. And he's just intoxicated by this world of ink and the calfskin pages. And Brother Aidan of Iona, this master illuminator, whose eyesight is fading and he needs help to finish this extravagant book, but he doesn't have the materials he needs. In order to get the inks to make this sacred thing, Brendan's got to go out into the forest. There's a problem. Abbot Kellock, his superior, who is in charge of the monastery of Kells, says, do not go beyond the walls. It's too dangerous. The Vikings are coming. There are wolves. There are all kinds of threats in the forest. Stay inside the walls. This is Abbot Kellock's blueprint room. These are his drawings for the wall, which will keep out the evil out there in the world and preserve the faithful, what is truly sacred. Brendan goes anyway, out into the woods, engaging the culture. And he meets, sure enough, a pagan spirit, a fairy named Ashlyn, who is curious about his language. What is ink? What are books? And then she shows him her forest, and he sees things beyond his wildest dreams. He also sees the wolves. But they become friends. They learn each other's languages, and together they find a safe place to play. And this is where creativity takes place. Children who do not have a safe place to play statistically are more likely to attempt suicide than others, because they have not developed the muscles they need here in order to imagine possible ways around a problem. All they can see is the problem. But if you have a safe place to try things and fail, a safe place to be courageous and cautious, you learn to imagine that there are many possibilities around a problem. And he finds a safe place to play with Aisling. And then, when he does, just as Abbot Kellock warned him, fall into the pit to face the devil called Crom Cruach, it is his creativity that helps him write his way out of the situation. Now look at the shape of Crom Cruach. He is angular, he is prescriptive, he is defining. He looks exactly like the drawings of the wall in Abbot Kellock's room. That's inside the walls. But when Brendan's creativity comes back into the monastery, his circles are permeable. They spin and they turn in the movie. It's beautiful. Light moves in and out of the various shapes, and it is a part of the environment around it. That is one movie. Then we move to something completely different. Anna Rose Holmer's directorial debut, The Fitz, which is streaming right now on Canopy and Amazon if you're interested. It's become one of my favorite films. I show this in as many classes as I can. Toni basically lives in a community center because her mother is working late and the father is not part of the picture. And this is a real community center in Cincinnati. The director found it and set her movie there. All of the children are African American in the movie. All of the people that work there are African American in the movie. You have to ask yourself, why is this community isolated? Why do they have nowhere else to go? Where are the resources for this community? And she spends her days moving back and forth in this binary world between the boys who are boxing and the girls who are training for competitive dance. And she doesn't fit in either place. She's the eccentric. She's the unusual one who doesn't feel called in either direction just yet. Maybe she's afraid, but she does spend her days helping, serving, humbly filling the water jugs and basically supporting everyone around her. But she can't help but wonder, who am I going to be when I grow up? And so there are so many shots of her outside the wall, so to speak, of these two worlds, male, female, dance, boxing, peering through these little windows where we see how isolated she is. But it seems so dangerous on the other side. The boys with their boxing seem, in their grace and agility, able to break the tyranny of gravity. Sometimes they seem to levitate. But she also sees them bloodied and crashing to the mat unconscious, and she thinks, do I want to go there? That looks dangerous. But then when she goes into the dancers' gymnasium and watches the dancers, she sees similar threats, and we become increasingly aware of how fragile she is in this world because everyone's sharing food. It's a weird thing in this movie. Like, this little girl will take a bite of a gummy worm and then pass it to somebody, and Tony will say no, but Maya will take it. And then on the boys' side of the gym, they tear into a pizza, and they're often eating off of the same slice. We're very aware, if we're germaphobes at all, that something terrible could quickly spread through this very close-knit community. And it happens. One by one, the young women start falling to these epileptic seizures, and nobody knows why. Is it the water? One little girl asks, is it a boyfriend disease? What do these fits symbolize? And my classes talk about this and argue about this. Is it puberty? Is it a sexual awakening? Is it a spiritual awakening? But go back to this moment. Tony pauses at the door and just very accidentally touches this lightning bolt. And I noticed that on the second or third viewing. She touches the lightning bolt and it comes off on her fingers, and I'm thinking, some strange energy has just gone into Tony. She is going to be different in the end. We have seen this before. People touched by lightning bolts. Harry Potter is the one who moves between worlds and reconciles things. He is the one who's been struck. All right, maybe in our own world we've seen a few like that as well. David Bowie, who is held up as this icon of artists, had one foot in male, one foot in female things, right? He actually had one foot in rock and one foot in pop, one foot in music and one foot in fashion. If you don't know this, he had his own line of men's evening gowns. Turn and face the strange. I also show them Moonrise Kingdom, where an orphan who is fed up with the adults in his community, the foster parents after foster parents who have let him down and neglected him, not to mention his original parents, runs away and takes this young girl with him who is also fed up with the hypocrisy of the adults in her community. Her mother is having an affair with the local policeman. The policeman, the law, is having an affair with her mother. Where do they go? To the edge of the water to try and discover for themselves what love should really look like and to claim the territory that has been denied them. And eventually, the boy is struck by lightning. Are these just fantasies? I read them as spiritual pilgrimages. Tony often wears this gray hoodie, and she looks a little bit like a monk. She's often carrying heavy burdens like Christian in Pilgrim's Progress. And when she seeks guidance, she leaves, she goes outside the walls. She climbs up on a bridge, all right? Heavy symbolism there. And as she practices her moves, we see both boxing and dancing. Something new is going to come out of this place that no one has been before. I'm not going to spoil the movie by telling you what does finally happen to Tony, but I want you to see the moment right before she knows what she's going to do. I guess we have no sound. That's all right. All you hear are the echoes of those very familiar, distinct echoes of like a high school. There it is. And the song continues, must we choose to be slaves to gravity? It's hard to see on that screen, but a murmuration of birds comes in behind her, seems to go into her head, come out the other side, and go back in, like a movement of the spirit. Is this a Christian movie? I like to say to my students. I don't know that the filmmakers are Christians, but isn't it Paul Simon who sang "The cross is in the ballpark, why deny the obvious"? For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so they are without excuse. She walks into the middle of an empty swimming pool, and those depth markers look an awful lot like crosses to me. And she looks up in the spirit of prayer, just like Babbitts at the edge of the water. And this is where artists need to go, need to have permission to go, need to have resources to go. Some artists may need a room in a church somewhere to set up a studio. I know more artists who need the resources to go somewhere where they will hear the muse speaking. And often they need to go to dark and dangerous places, or at least those places that seem dark and dangerous to us in the church, as if those dangers aren't already alive and well within our church. David Dark, one of my favorite writers and commentators on church and culture, says C.S. Lewis once observed that while people may use art, only a very few receive it. The texts that get called scriptures by various religious traditions are often used by individuals, mostly quoted out of context, to buttress bad arguments, and on occasion to avoid awareness of responsibility for our actions. We read and quote selectively to better justify what we've already decided to do. Where is the self-awareness in any of this? The sense that our scriptures can and should change the way we think and act, maybe rewrite our DNA. Are we up for a redeeming word? We only receive art, he says, when we let it call our own lives into question. So I was holding forth about movies, as you probably now know I tend to do, at a table of moviegoers, and this quiet guy sat down next to me, and after a while I was kind of like, well, you weren't in our film seminar, who are you? And he's like, oh, I work in the movies. I'm like, oh, really? And I say what you should never say. Anything I would have heard of that you worked on? Oh, sorry. He's like, well, yeah, I did the sound for the new version of Apocalypse Now. What? And I've worked on Sofia Coppola's films. What? He just did the Jurassic World movies. He just did the sound for Won't You Be My Neighbor. So I interviewed him for Image. I'm like, where did you come from? We need to talk. And I asked him, well, where's the art in sound design? Can you talk about that? Where's the art in it? And he said, well, I was working on this show called Hemingway and Gellhorn, and there's a scene where Hemingway is fishing. And earlier in the show, I had recorded the sound of a rattlesnake to pair with an image of a rattlesnake. And all of a sudden I thought, what if I used the sound of the rattlesnake as he casts his fishing line to underline that sort of predatory masculinity that's simmering in Hemingway's work? And I stepped back, he said, and I looked at my library of sound and I realized all of it was music. So that's what I called the interview. And not many people have this happen to them. My favorite rock band read that interview and released an album called Meet Me at the Edge of the World. Okay, now we're back to Babbitts again, right? And on that album, they have a song called All of It Was Music. A place where we could rest a while, where hummingbirds could thrum for miles, and we could leave the edges wild and let wild birds sing through us. Fires where all our sparks could scatter, midnight stars could drop their ladders. I'm not sure any of it matters, but all of it was music. Weird. So I associate their music with what they play on stage. They associate it with what's coming through all of the other things they suffer and experience. A few weeks back, I went and saw the last film by the Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami. And he wanted to share with the world as his final project a film called 24 Frames. And what it is 24 photographs he took in places where he had meditative experiences. Just 24 photographs, 2 hours. You sit and you look at a photograph for almost 10 minutes, and then it changes. But as you're watching, he has had digital artists slowly bring the snow to life. And then the animals begin to move, and you drift into a dream, and everybody left except 7 of us. And we stayed, and when we emerged after watching this bird shift slightly in shadow, or these birds move up and down the railing while the weather moved in, we left feeling like we were a community with some kind of sacred secret. All we had done was go to the edge of the water with Abbas Kiarostami. He doesn't tell us what he learned there. He lets us have our own experiences, the way true artists will. Maybe it's not so bad to be rewritten a little by wonder, but we walked out of there feeling like we were new. We walked in not knowing we were broken. We emerged feeling repaired. But it was fake news. NASA finally came out a couple weeks later and said, calm down. None of his DNA was rewritten. You're misreading our report. DNA doesn't get rewritten. He's still Scott Kelly. They are still identical twins. Here's what happened. When you go into a strange place or a toxic place, or you dive deep into the ocean, your DNA learns to behave differently in order to try and preserve you in those conditions, but also in order to equip you to engage those conditions. And when he came back, this is what's weird, 7% of his DNA doesn't know he's back. It's as if now he's a person who can live in space and live here. He has more capacities than he did before, but he is still the same person. Now I look around at all of my favorite stories, the ones I grew up with, and they are all about somebody crossing that line, stepping outside the familiar, stepping beyond the bounds of what is safe and what is coded, and exposing themselves to new dangers. And it's scary out there, it's dangerous. You may want to make millions of people happy, but you won't necessarily survive. Sometimes we are catapulted outside of our comfort zones. Sometimes we are made artists against our will. But when those prodigals come back, we can welcome them and learn from what they have learned. They have witness to bear. The singer-songwriter Sam Phillips was sort of driven out of Christian pop music because she sang about her doubts, God forbid. And now she sings to audiences all over the world with great respect from artists everywhere, lyrics like these. Now that I've worn out the world. I'm on my knees in fascination, looking through the night. And the moon's never seen me before, but I'm reflecting light. Having gone to that dark place, she does not give light of her own, she reflects it. And if we welcome the prodigals home, maybe we won't just pat ourselves on the back for saving them. Maybe actually they are coming to us with something that we need to hear. She was a lonely artist that the church was uncomfortable with. And these children that you spit on as they try to change their worlds, as they are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through, David Bowie sings. Turn and face the strange. It is a frightening thing, says Madeleine LEngle, to open oneself to this strange and dark side of the divine. It means letting go our sane self-control. That control that only gives us the illusion of safety. Letting go of it is part of listening to the silence and to the spirit. So, artists, go, be cautious, be courageous, go to the wild edges of things and be still, and then bear witness to those who will listen. And churches, support them. When I got a book contract with a Christian publisher for a novel, they asked me to send them Bible verses that would tell them what my story was going to teach. And I said, I don't know. The story is still just beginning to talk to me. You took me on because you told me some of the writing was beautiful. If it's beautiful, I mean, isn't that light? I would hope so. I hope I don't have to explain these things to you. Churches support them and love them and trust them and let them go to dangerous places. Because when we turn to face the wild and strange, O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder, when I consider all of the worlds beyond these walls that thy hands have made, when I see the stars and hear that ominous rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed, when I look at all of those dark and strange and dangerous things, then sings my soul. Thank you. And thank you to Shannon and to Emily and to Lauren and everyone who has brought us together today. The connections between these little conversations that have happened today have just kind of been blowing my mind as if we strategized together. But I think that should be telling us something, that there's something bigger than all of us that has something to say. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.